Here's some random Japanese music recommendations. A long time ago, when I made one of my recommendations for Japanese extreme metal, someone was like, hey, do you have any non-metal band recommendations? And like, yeah, I guess I do. And that was so long ago that I actually can't find the comment anymore, so sorry to the person who asked, but hey, here you go. Why would anyone care about music I like? I don't know, but here's the video on it. So I don't think any of these are going to be like super obscure or anything, but probably the first Japanese band I ever heard of in any context was Mel Banana, which is like a Japanese rock noise group. This album in particular is one that was really influential to me during high school, and I think that this album is pretty amazing, especially on the first half. I prefer Mel Banana songs that are a bit more on the rock side than the noise side. I do like noise rock, but I don't really like noise. Like, I did buy a few Merzbow albums in university, but I can't say I ever really got into it. The first half of this album, which has a lot of songs I think are pretty accessible rock and roll with that kind of noise vibe, especially this track, which is one of my favorites they've ever done, are just lovely, although it does have the dog song on it, which I think is one of the hardest to listen to songs that's ever been recorded. I would even put Merzbow in easy listening compared to that sometimes. But all in all, they have a really frenetic energy, and I like what they do. The second band that I discovered quite early on, before I spoke any Japanese, was Polyix. I consider this group to be kind of like the spiritual successor to Devo in some ways. They're a really fun rock group. All four members of the band sing, and they all have really individual styles, which leads to each song kind of sounding fresh in some ways. I think their earlier stuff is not the best, and I think they really lost track on kind of their later albums, but the whole mid-career has a lot of excellent songs in my opinion. It's a bit silly. There's like a moon language or something that they speak at parts. But while the appearance, while some of the song topics, etc., can be lighthearted or even just dumb or bizarre, the actual approach to the music is very serious, and I always like that balance. A lot of their albums are just fun all the way through, and I really appreciate that. Stuff that's a little heavier in the rock sphere, but not full on extreme metal kind of stuff. I then also really like Onmyoza. Some people would call them Visual K, but I don't think they really are. I think they kind of straddle a boundary between Visual K and just hard rock, heavy metal, although with a definite Asian music influence. There are some albums like this newer one, which I actually say are extreme metal, but a lot of their earlier stuff are not and have a lot of very interesting approaches. One thing I really like about them, although it can be frustrating to get into them, is all of their albums do have a very distinct sound to them. And I can't actually recommend any of them to you individually because I can't read the names of any of their albums because they really like using extremely difficult kanji in them. But honestly, starting with some of their most popular tracks I think is a good place to go. And there's no question they've been a massive influence on, Japanese music to date. If you are a fan of Visual K, etc., and you haven't listened to them, well, I definitely think you should. Another heavy metal sort of band that I really like, I guess depends on the album a lot here, is Seimatu. This is a great band not only because their name is a pun on end of the world, right? Tu and Matsu. But they have a lot of theatricism to them, and they're like what Kiss would be if Kiss made music that I enjoyed. First album, I think, is shockingly good. It's rare, in my opinion, that a band can put out an album this good on their first try. The lead single of this album, Rolling-Yo no Yakata, is the most popular song they've ever written, so it's not an obscure recommendation, but it's just amazing. And they have a lot of other songs to like as well. That said, their albums are really hit or miss, especially on the later ones. Like this album, Plonk, for instance, has some tracks that I think are pretty great. The lyrics to this one I find to be dripping with sarcasm in a way that's really interesting, but there are a lot that are pretty boring. But there's no question that a greatest hits album of theirs can be really quite enjoyable. In that same vein, though, I think Ningen Isu is just kind of a better version of that, or at least a more consistent version. Some people call them the Japanese Black Sabbath, and I think that's honestly a pretty accurate representation. They've had some videos recently go viral and get millions of views, which is really cool to see. So I think a lot of people know about them. But personally, if you've only seen their singles and stuff, I'd recommend diving into their catalog a bit because they've changed a lot over time. And I actually think songs where the bassist leads are some of the most kind of interesting in some ways. Like the track Imamushi, which is just really creepy in a really delightful way. That has that kind of dark bluesy rock thing that you don't see that much in music anymore, which I think is kind of unfortunate because it's always been one that I have enjoyed. The reason that I do enjoy bands like Sabbath time to time. Also, a quick shout out to the band Frederick for their song Odd Loop. This song is excellent. It's a 10 out of 10. I think it's fantastic. I tried listening to other songs they wrote and I didn't like any of them, but this song is good enough to recommend. I also am a huge fan of the band Obulki Beaver, which is a Japanese feminist punk band. They have an insane amount of manic energy with all of the members screaming into the microphone in a way that feels like you're kind of being yelled at by a bunch of people that are mad at you, which is a confronting but very enjoyable experience, especially given the style of music that's being played. And the lyrics are kind of a delightful, madcap, and very sarcastic approach to gender politics in Japan. They have a really wonderful way of taking day-to-day problems, day-to-day I guess you call them microaggressions, and turning them into song topics. such as like a selfish lover in the bedroom, pressure to have children, or even just like assumptions that a woman at an after-work party will be the one who like passes around salads. There's just a delightful energy and kind of insanity, hyper-focus to their tracks that I think are really intense and great. And honestly, listening to them is the most I've enjoyed the punk genre since like middle school, to be honest. I'm then also a big fan of the band Necryaki, who I found bizarrely because YouTube recommended to me after I listened to like, I think it was a Dying Fetus track. And apparently I'm not the only one. I can find people saying like they were listening to grindcore and they are recommended this band. So I have no idea why the algorithm thinks that this band is one that people that like extreme metal will really like, but I guess it is. This may be like a bizarre take, but I guess I see them as like a very accessible version of Mel Banana in some ways. On first listen, their music is really kind of light and fluffy, but the lyrics are honestly quite usually a bit dark. Humorous, not like, depressing, but with some like darker topics or discussion of like even just vulgarity use and things like that. Their music videos are a lot of fun, and what I've really grown to appreciate about them is that when you listen to the song, it's enjoyable on first listen, but what makes it like something I'd actually recommend is if you go back and kind of listen again, every single member of the band is always doing more than they have to, if that makes sense. Like they're doing more than a generic band that kind of sounds like that should. So there's kind of a process where you can listen to the song once and enjoy it, and then go back and listen, focusing on kind of each instrument. And then when you listen to it again, after doing that, hearing how it actually all comes together and understanding how they're all really building off each other and just doing fun things together and giving time for every musician in the band to shine, makes it a project that I think is one that has songs you can kind of keep coming back to over and over and over again. It's very light, it's very fluffy. I'm honestly always surprised that I like it whenever I listen to it, given my normal listening habits, but I do. It's really good, and I'd highly recommend them. I also like Otto. Otto is good. I saw Otto in Sydney, and it was a lot of fun. Finally, my biggest recommendation, because they're honestly like my favorite Japanese band, if not one of my favorite bands at all right now, is Hachiju Hachi Kasho Junrei, or Pilgrimage to the 88 Temples, which is a reference to the pilgrimage in Shikoku. You might have heard of this band even if you haven't, because if you watch Bocchi the Rock, the drunken character is based off the singer Margaret. This one right here. And there's even a reference to the scene in their first music video where he kind of pops out of an amp. But this is a kind of a prog rock band that I guess would describe as some kind of mashup of like Primus and Led Zeppelin. Their songs occasionally move into kind of the noise rock space. Their first single is very much so. It has a combined bass, drum, and guitar line that is just kind of uncomfortable in a confronting but enjoyable way. I don't think many people will get this reference, but it's one of the most enjoyably unpleasant sound combinations that I've heard since I first listened to like the band Virus. But I feel they have gotten more accessible as time has gone on, although this isn't meant to be bad at all. Two of my favorite songs of theirs, Kyokan Dekinai, and this could be Deishun or Doroharu, I don't really know. They don't have any of the dissonance that marked some of their earlier work, but still remain just a really incredibly dense and interesting mix of guitar, drum, and bass that always makes me shocked that just three people are putting the music together. It's very difficult to access their music through most streaming services, etc., but there's a good range of their stuff on YouTube, and their videos are also usually fun to watch. If you like progressive rock at all, I can't recommend them highly enough. They have a huge range of songs to date, and they just do really great stuff. So anyway, that's my opinion on music. I'm not a musicologist. I have no qualifications here. These are just things that I enjoy, and I hope that maybe you will enjoy some of them too. Thank you, person whose comment I can't find, for asking my random opinions about some things, because it's always nice to take a break from the slang reviews. And if anyone else has any other random topics they'd like me to talk about, I'd be happy to do that too. Until then, see you next time, and happy listening.